For the sake of my own career, I won't be name dropping any specific players in this video, and any stories where we do talk about the cheaters, I'll change the names to protect their privacy. If you've ever been cheated against in the Pokemon trading card game, or any other card game for that matter, and want to share your story, let me know them in the comments down below, and the ones that get the most votes, the best or the worst stories. Maybe we'll do like a big story time video where I recap and share all the stories, and I'll include some of my own too. Cheaters exist everywhere, from Call of Duty to Apex Legends, Counter-Strike, Yu-Gi-Oh!, the nightclubs, and of course, the topic of this video, the Pokemon trading card game. Hey, my name's Christian. I'm a competitive Pokemon card player and content creator who's been playing the game for about the last 5 years. And over these years, I've attended hundreds and hundreds of tournaments, and on average, I attend 2 to 4 local Pokemon card tournaments here in the Toronto area weekly. Cheaters suck, and as a competitive person in many aspects of my life, cheating is one of the things that really grinds my gears. Online versus in real life cheating. When it comes to video games, cheaters and hackers are annoying as hell. And as good as anti-cheat software is going to get, cheating is just not going to stop anytime soon. At the end of the day, if you get cooked by a cheater or hacker online, you just gotta exhale or scream like a 9-year-old for 5 seconds and say, go next. However, in the Pokemon TCG, you can't really cheat online. Quick shout out to those of you who know all about the cheating that goes down in Digimon and in One Piece with those webcam tournaments. There's some pretty outrageous stuff that's happened. But back to Pokemon, or Pokemon Trading Card Game Live, the online client. It is so bad. It is absolute dog water. So to find out a way to cheat on that client is some next level stuff, and you should probably help develop the game, okay? Use your talents to help us, because we need help. We're suffering on PTCG Live. You literally can't cheat online as far as I know. Now, in real life play, cheating can be a very real thing, and losing to a cheater can be a hard pill to swallow. And half the times you get cheated against, you probably didn't even know what happened. And it sucks extra because you can't just say GG, go next, because when you do get cheated at a tournament, for example, it affects everything from your tournament run, who you're going to play next, how the standings are going to go, how the resistance will work out, and yeah, it changes things. And it's one thing to get cheated against online, but getting cheated against in person from the person sitting across from you, that's like a different level of like pain. It's just weird. It's different. If you get cheated against in person, there's a very low chance you'll actually know about it unless you were able to catch them in the act and you were actually actively looking out for it to begin with. Now, unlike video games online where a lot of them are now free to play and you're just getting cheated out of your time essentially, Pokemon tournaments are a little bit different. Pokemon tournaments are usually an investment of a couple of hours at the minimum, and although some of the tournaments are free, a lot of them are paid, and the entry fee to play in these will range from anywhere between $5 to $30, and you might even have to pay for parking on top. And now that entry fee doesn't straight up just go right to the store for playing. It actually goes to the prize pool. So this money that all the players are putting together to enter with, that's going to be cashed out to the top players of each tournament. And with actual prizing and prize packs and booster packs on the line, people will get slimy, people will get desperate. Prizing for Pokemon card tournaments can be anywhere from, you know, prize pack booster packs to the booster packs from the latest set to even a full booster box or elite trainer boxes. The prizes can vary. And in terms of money, some stores will actually cash out money, or they'll often give you store credit, and that can be anywhere from $5 or $10 to a couple $100 depending on how many players are entered and what the price to enter was. And that's just at the local level. Let's actually talk about the majors level with the regionals, internationals, and world championships. For Pokemon TCG regional tournaments, these are the payouts. For getting as low as top 32, you get $1,000, but if you get first place, you can get $10,000, and this is in US. For international tournaments, you get cashed out at top 64 starting at $2,000, and if you win the tournament, you get $25,000. And for the world championships, the big tournament of the year that players grind all year long to try and qualify for, well, top 32 gets you $5,000 US, and if you win the whole thing, you get $50,000 US on top of all the other stamped and limited rare goodies you get that collectors love to pay a huge amount for as well. So I just want to put those numbers out there, so if you aren't super familiar with the competitive Pokemon scene, maybe you're more casual, maybe you're a collector, you actually know like how much money is at stake or can be at stake for a lot of these players. And for a lot of players, there's a lot of ways to make money in the Pokemon TCG. We're not going to go through all of them, but being a great player and continuously cashing out and getting cash rewards, or the performance, the bonuses you could say for doing well at these tournaments, can snowball and build momentum throughout the season, and you just go from one tournament to the next, and there's actual travel stipends that you can qualify for that Pokemon pays out the top players so they can attend more tournaments. It's a cool system that they have going on. But yeah, there's a lot of real money on the line, just like any sort of esport out there. Fun fact, the most recent unofficially banned player received over $100,000 in prizing over the last couple of years playing the Pokemon TCG. And that's just prize money specifically. They've also made money through other means, such as coaching, and the list goes on. Now that's pretty crazy. But what's even crazier is, unlike esports, where a lot of the esports will actually call out the players for cheating and publicly shame them and even sometimes pursue them legally, Pokemon just doesn't do that. They don't publicly name drop. There's no official statements. It's weird. It's strange. And I get it, but I don't get it at the same time. So with that said, in this next portion of the video, I'm going to teach you guys how to catch cheaters and also how to defend yourself against cheaters, or just play in a more clean way where you don't have to worry about cheaters as much, because you're taking care of things, you're dotting the T's, crossing the I's, you're one step ahead of the cheaters, preventing them from being in a position where they can cheat or things can go down in a way that is unfair for you as a player who's playing legitimately. In a Pokemon card tournament, you can always call a judge. How do you call a judge, you might ask? Well, all you have to do is raise your hand and yell the word judge. Now, the first time you ever make a judge call might seem daunting at times, especially if you're a shy, introverted person. But trust me, once you do your first judge call, it kind of is like, it's like learning how to ride a bike. Like, once you do a first judge call, it gets easier and easier, and then you'll understand when you'll need to make judge calls for certain plays and when you can just kind of fix things yourself without getting judges involved. Because sometimes there's not enough judges in a certain tournament where they can get to everybody in adequate time. So if you're ever confused about a play or unsure about a ruling, or something happened that shouldn't have happened, like maybe someone drew an extra card or someone used an ability that they shouldn't have, or there's sort of anything that could be questionable, always call a judge. That's what they're there for after all, right? And judges, honestly, they love judge calls because that's action for them. They get to flex their judge muscles. They get to flex their judge brain muscles. And that's what they're there for. They get paid as well, whether it be through the store paying them directly or through the like professor judge system thing they have going on with Pokemon. So here's a bunch of things to look out for that cheaters do. Stacking. Stacking is the big one. If you want to make sure you're playing a proper legit game of Pokemon, you want the decks to be properly randomized and shuffled whenever they're supposed to be properly randomized and shuffled. Stacking is when a player is able to manipulate the order of the cards in their deck, usually at the top, so that they can benefit from it, whether it be stacking a boss's orders or just any card at all that will give them an advantage when they shouldn't have an advantage, when it should be random. So always be mindful where your opponent's eyes are when they're shuffling. It's very, very common that players will shuffle in a way where the cards will face themselves. Like if they're looking down, the cards they'll be shuffling could be in a way where at your peripheral vision can see the cards, even if it's the bottom card or top card of your deck. The player having the knowledge of what those cards are, it shouldn't be a thing. It just shouldn't be a thing at all. So if a player is shuffling, make sure that they are shuffling with the cards facing downwards. Be mindful about your opponent's shuffles and make sure you are seeing those mass shuffles happen between like 7 to 8 times. That's like a good amount of time for the deck to be sufficiently randomized. And of course, just cutting the deck too is always good as well. And you don't always have to cut their deck. You don't always have to shuffle. You know, sometimes you want to keep it random. If they catch on to how you shuffle or cut their deck each time, they might try and manipulate their deck in that way. So yeah, make sure the decks are properly shuffled. Also, in regards to stacking or shuffling and proper randomization, make sure the top card and the bottom card of your opponent's deck are actively changing each time they're shuffling. It doesn't have to be each specific time they're shuffling, but make a note to make sure that those cards, the top and the bottom ones, are changing thoroughly, or else they could be stacking against you, and that would suck. Messy boards. Board state is very important in Pokemon TCG, and one thing I've noticed for a lot of players is things can get pretty sloppy. In the Pokemon TCG, it's both players' responsibility to maintain a clean board state. However, there will always be players who lack accountability for whatever reason to maintain their own board state, whether it's their selfishness, maybe they just are a very sloppy, messy person. It's still their responsibility to maintain a clean board state. So if you have to ask them to clean up their board a little bit, just ask them to clean up their board a little bit. Information is very important in the Pokemon trading card game, and so knowing the amount of energies a Pokemon has or a tool has is really critical at times. If a player is deliberately hiding a tool card that's attached to it or an energy that's attached to a Pokemon, that is definitely a gray area, and so that's why you always want to try and maintain a clean board state for both players. And that's why you'll notice it too in Pokemon TCG live streams at major tournaments. The judges are pretty on top of maintaining a clean board state so that it's not just great for the players to also see what's going on and happening, but so the viewers at home can also understand what's happening. Because when there's so much cardboard on the table, things can get messy pretty quickly. Not announcing actions. I don't know why, but some players like to go non-verbal when they play Pokemon TCG. Why are you going non-verbal? I need to know what actions you're making. If you're using an ability, I'd like to know the ability that you're using. Or if you're using an attack, don't just say knockout or attack. If a Pokemon has multiple attacks and you have reason to use both, just saying knockout is not good enough. I need to know what you're doing on your side of the field. Now, I totally get it if you and your opponent have like a repertoire where you know exactly what's going on and you've had this level of communication already where you don't have to announce every single action, but just small things like saying flip the script or recon, stuff like that, or itchy pollen. It's very important to actually announce these things because who knows, there could be room for interpretation that something didn't happen if it did, or you could say something did happen when it didn't. If, for example, an ability was used but no marker was used on it, but you were using abilities on the previous turn and using markers as well, it becomes very sloppy and sticky. So announce your actions and also try and make sure your opponent is announcing their actions too. Not revealing cards properly. A lot of cards will specify you reveal the card to your opponent. Make sure they're revealing the card to you and verify that if it's a Pokemon they're supposed to grab, it's a Pokemon. If they're supposed to grab an energy and an evolution Pokemon, verify that it's an energy and an evolution Pokemon, not just any Pokemon. Now, opponents not revealing cards isn't usually a big thing, but it's one of those things that can stack on top of the other things that do raise the alarm bells, that will raise some red flags. And when you combine certain things like not announcing actions or not revealing cards, and playing very fast or having a sloppy board state, you can really see how things can add up and it makes a player look quite suspicious. So those are things you want to look out for. This next one kind of relates to having a messy board state, and that is discard effects being used but not playing cleanly. So what I mean by that is, I have one really great example from a regional tournament that took place in many years ago, Pittsburgh. One of my opponents, every single time they would play a quick ball, or in today's standard meta, maybe an ultra ball, they would say quick ball. They would drop the quick ball in their discard pile and not even show me the card that they discarded with the quick ball. And before I could say anything, they're already in their deck. So that's just like poor manners, like not telling me what you're discarding, but it also looks very suspicious if you are supposed to discard 1 or 2 cards and then you're just not revealing 1 or 2 cards that you're discarding as proof that you're discarding them and then going into your deck. Chaining multiple actions involving deck searches in a sloppy way. So this could be a player going in and out of their deck for multiple deck searches, whether it be for an item card that they're using or supporter that they're using, and they might be getting one step ahead of themselves and they just might be playing too fast, or they might be calculating it to try and play in a way where they're distracting you with one thing and they're going to be going in and out of their deck for multiple things when they shouldn't be. So this could be possibly getting them an extra card that they shouldn't be getting, or they could be getting them a kind of card that they should not be getting to begin with. But whenever a player is combining multiple actions of multiple effects or cards or whatever at the same time into one effect, it is always a little, you got to be careful. You got to be careful because that's definitely an area where if a player might not even be necessarily trying to cheat, but they could be making a mistake which could lead to an unfair advantage for that player. So just chaining multiple actions all in one. Next up is one that's pretty easy to counteract, and that is drawing extra cards. Now, personally, you've honestly probably seen this too a whole bunch of times. Players drawing 2 cards or 3 cards. Just drawing more than 1 card when they shouldn't be is always a scary situation, because if you see an additional card, that'll usually lead to a double prize penalty if it's not caught. If it's caught, If it's not caught, then your opponent is getting a bonus card that they just should not have, and card advantage is a very real and big thing in the Pokemon game. That's why to defend yourself against players drawing additional cards when they shouldn't be, is you want to ask your opponent how many cards are in their hand. Usually people will only ask that question if they're planning to do some sort of hand disruption card like an Iono or a Judge or a Unfair Stamp. They want to know how much cards are in their hand, and then if it's worth maybe disrupting them. But if you're also just consistently asking how much cards are in your opponent's hand, even if you don't plan to disrupt them, that's going to keep a little alarm in their head to know that you're monitoring their hand, and that if they're going to be drawing additional cards, you're locked in enough to remember how many cards they had in their hand. So if their hand size increases by 1 when it shouldn't have, then you're gonna notice that sort of thing. Personally, I'm usually really locked in when I'm watching my opponent play. So I'll actually put my hand on the table, and I put a die on the top of my hand of the cards to represent how many cards are in my hand. So my opponent doesn't even have to ask me a question. They can just like look at the die and it'll show them how many cards are in my hand. I love doing that. It's a really clean way to play. All your attention is focused. It's on your opponent. Then they're even less likely to cheat because you're watching. You're genuinely like watching them like a hound dog, monitoring each thing that they're doing. You know that you're not distracted trying to fidget with your own hand or anything like that. Now, I get for some newer players, maybe you want to be fidgeting with your hand and also, you know, calculating what your next move might be against your opponent. But if you know how to play your deck, if you know how to play it well, if you can do this, I highly recommend it. Just put your hand down, and you can remember the cards in your hand really easily if there's not too many cards. Just put a die on top. And I've noticed when I start doing that, my opponents will start doing it too, and I really, really appreciate that. It's like a nice common courtesy, so you don't have to keep asking cards in hand. Some players will accidentally draw more cards than they should, whether it be from an ability or whatever, or flip the script or recon or whatever. Draw for turn even can be a situation. So when you do draw cards, you should draw like the Japanese do. The Japanese do it where they put the card down on the table and then they pick it up. Like they count the cards out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then they pick them up. So by not like some players just draw cards in a way where they're opening themselves up to the risk of drawing additional cards. You could also be protecting your opponent from getting a DPL because maybe they play in a sloppy way where they just potentially draw bonus cards. You're saving them from that heartache as well. And I think I can say for every player out there, we appreciate a nice clean game where your opponent is also looking out for you, preventing you getting DPLs. This is for the very start of a Pokemon card tournament, more so for those like weekly league local tournament nights, not so for the paid ones where you have to register your deck ahead of time. At a Pokemon card tournament, you're supposed to have selected your deck before you start the tournament, right? You flip the coin, you pick who goes first and who goes second, and then you start the game. However, there will be players who will bring multiple decks to a tournament, and then they'll flip the coin with the player at the start to decide who goes first or second, without actually having their deck present on the table. And then at that point, once they've figured out if they're going first or second based off of the coin flip, they will pick their deck based off of that information to give them an unfair advantage. So make sure your opponent has their deck at the table so they can't just switch it out if the coin flip doesn't favor them. There's pre-release cheating that goes down, and some players, in fact, will bring pre-release decks from other pre-release tournaments that are like souped up and like really strong and upgraded with cards that were not in their original build and battle kit. So basically there's going to be people cheating, bringing pre-constructed decks to a pre-release tournament. So be on the lookout for that as well. It's kind of hard to catch, but yeah, pre-release tournaments, sometimes the pricing can be really good too. And if you cheat at pre-release, you suck, man. Like, pre-releases are supposed to be some of the most fun, wholesome matches where no one really cares. And I've seen it happen. I'm not going to call anyone out, but bringing basically your pre-built deck to pre-release, that is cheating. Now, I'm sure you've heard about things like slow play, and we're going to get to slow play later in the video, but fast play is another form of cheating as well, where players are playing so fast where they're going to try and use an ability an extra time on their turn. They're going to try and do things so fast in a way where you don't realize that they've done something, and then they're going to ask you if they've done it or not. And if you weren't paying attention, then that's going to give them permission to use that ability or do whatever they want at extra time. So that's why it's important to be locked in onto your opponent's actions. I've had opponents do this to me, and I've also had opponents do this to my friends who've caught them cheating as well. That's why it's very important to use things like jumbo coins or any sort of marker to label when an ability is used. Even if my opponent isn't using ability use markers, I might use ability use markers on my side of the board for them without touching their cards. So for example, you can use like jumbo coins to keep track of, like, there's like a boss's orders coin, right? You can use that jumbo coin, flip it over when your opponent plays a supporter. You can use an energy coin and you flip it over when your opponent attaches for turn. You can have another coin or marker for when an opponent uses an ability or retreats. These are all certain actions that can only happen once per turn, and the game state can easily be broken if a once per turn action is done more than once per turn. Even if it's something really small, it's very important to keep track of these certain actions, and that's why, like, when judges judge, they're also given like a checklist thing. And judges can sometimes suck at it too on stream. I've seen it many times before. You have too. Players will get away with a double attachment or a double retreat or a double extra ability. Those are some big game breaking things. And those are the kind of things that are so small that the average player might not notice. But if you're a cheater, those are things you're going to try and take advantage of. So try and keep track of the board, whether it's your side of things or your opponent's. That way everything is clean and it's fair play for both players. I also am a huge advocate for using ability use markers or jumbo coins or anything like that rather than just tapping a card, because tapping a card can be, what's the right word? Tapping a card could be misinterpreted as maybe you bumped it earlier or you forgot to untap the card on the next turn. Combining actions when you really shouldn't be. Easy thing to catch if you are looking out for it. One thing I've seen happen in the past on actual professional Pokemon streams at major tournaments is I've seen a player retreat the Pokemon from the active into a Pokemon that's in their hand. So the player who's benching, the cheater in this case, isn't benching their Pokemon. They're putting in the Pokemon to the active from their hand and also attaching an energy or whatever at the same time. When it comes to a future action, maybe a minute or two later in the turn, a player might have forgotten that they actually attached an energy to the Pokemon they put into the active, and you might have just assumed that energy was there from something else. Well, you weren't keeping track of it, or if you were, it was hard to keep track of because your opponent was doing two actions at the same time. In this case, the cheater on stream was able to get away with it, and they actually won the match. Slow play is a very interesting gray area in the Pokemon card game. In any sport, there's a clock, right? There's a clock that's universally shared across both teams or both players. In Pokemon, you also share the same clock. However, there's certain decks that will take longer actions or longer turns than usual compared to others. For example, if I'm a Miraidon player and I'm doing something like Tandem Unit, those actions are very quick and precise. I don't need to think too long as to what I'm grabbing. I'm probably going to grab a Joltik, I'm probably going to grab an Iron Hands or whatever, you know? But there's certain actions that will require a lot more thinking. However, don't let your opponent eat up most of the time just because they're using a big brain deck or a deck that involves a lot more actions and a lot more thinking. Just because you played at a quick pace and didn't eat up the clock doesn't mean your opponent can disregard the clock and play at their own slow pace as well. At Pokemon regional tournaments, for example, it's 2 out of 3, and to win the full match you have to be the player with the most wins out of those 2 to win the game. So if you want to, for example, this is very common for Gardevoir players because Gardevoir is just known as a slower deck. Players would play a very long game 1, they would win it, and then go into game 2 with no plan to actually finish that game, and if they know they're going to lose, they're going to drag out the clock. So hopefully by the time that full round is up, that the game 2 hasn't concluded, and that because your opponent hasn't won, making it a tie, the person who won the game 1 and slow played during game 2, they win the full set because they didn't end up losing one of the games. Slow play is a very scary thing to think about in the Pokemon TCG. I think somebody might have gotten banned for talking about it. Right now there's like a current unwritten rule where you can spend like the first 2 minutes of your first deck search to do a prize check. It's something like that, something egregious, something crazy. But yeah, your first prize check will be usually the longest, and that's like it's cool amongst both players. It's even common for players to allow other players to prize check while it's not their turn. So like, say I had a quick turn, but I'm going to do my prize check. I want you to start your turn anyways. I'll say I'm going to do my prize check and you can continue to do your turn, and most players will be cool with that. But prize checking, that opening turn will usually take a long time. When it comes to other actions in the game, I think the general rule is like 15 to 20 seconds top per action. So the second you play a nest ball, you should have about 15 seconds to pick a Pokemon, put it on the bench, and then shuffle and do all that. Some players will try and take advantage and they'll stretch it out to 25 or 30 seconds, and those seconds really add up over time. And before you know it, if you were playing with something like a chess clock, maybe your opponent has used up 75% of the time allotted for the match and you've only used up 25%. That gives your opponent a really big advantage, being that they got to have a lot more time to think about each of their actions. So if they're playing a deck that involves, you know, a lot of shuffling or a lot of thinking and stuff like that, it's unfair to you as a player who's trying to play quicker, because you know what to do. You know what to do in the scenario. And so I hate slow players. Slow play can happen from any player using any type of deck. Players will play for every single action that they can do. They'll shuffle their deck. They'll do something egregious like they'll play a nest ball, pick a card, and then shuffle their deck, and then alright, they'll play another nest ball, do their whole thing, shuffle their deck again. 2 nest balls might have just ate up 2 minutes. So that's why it's really important before shuffling your deck and properly randomizing it after doing a deck search, you look back at your hand and double check if you're going to go back in for any other plays you might need to make involving going into your deck for some deck search. So that's why it's a really good etiquette for your opponent to ask you, or for you to ask your opponent, hey, are you going to go back in? That way you don't waste extra time with, you know, shuffling and whatnot, because time is of the essence for Pokemon. Sometimes 30 minutes just isn't enough for one full game of Pokemon, and 50 minutes is crazy. Trying to put 3 games of Pokemon into 50 minutes almost feels impossible at times, especially at a regional. And if you're 2 decks that are both playing slower decks, you can almost essentially know by turn 1 or turn 2 that we're only going to play 1 real game, and the second game is not going to matter. So just keep that in mind. Slow playing is a real thing. If your opponent is playing at a very slow pace, or they're playing suspiciously where they're continuously doing, you know, going into their deck search and shuffling and going to their deck again and shuffling and going to the deck again and shuffling, and they're trying to run down the clock, call a judge. It's one of the things that bit me in the butt the most playing in my earlier years, is I would not judge call slow players, and it would basically be giving my opponent the win in that match, or the tie when I should be winning the full set. So speak up about slow play. Palming is another form of cheating where players will take a card out of their discard pile or their deck, you could say in some cases as well, where they add it to their hand when it should not be there. That's why it's important to keep track of your opponent's resources. One of the most important ones is boss's orders, for example. If you know your opponent is desperately needing that boss's orders and that's like what they need to win, you want to keep track of the amount of boss's orders they have in the discard pile, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3, or keep track of the artwork as well for those boss's orders, because it can be very apparent that your opponent is cheating if your opponent has used 2 boss's orders but they only have 1 boss's orders in their discard pile. How did they get that extra boss's orders, you might ask? Well, they probably cheated. So it's also quite important to keep track of your opponent's resources, and that's why some players will often ask to see your discard pile, and that's why you yourself might actually want to ask your opponent to see their discard pile too, to just, you know, keep track of what's in their discard pile, even if you have no intentions of really keeping track. Similar to asking cards in hand, it just keeps your opponent in check. It's like, hey, I'm watching, I have access to this, I could be keeping track, I might not be, but I could be. So now they're less likely to cheat against you because there's a chance you're actually keeping track of their resources. Your Pokemon card hand should be on the table at all times. It is always insanely suspicious if my opponent ever brings their Pokemon hand to beneath the table, to a place where I can't have direct sightline to it. Maybe they have a card in their pocket and they have it on their lap. If they're able to somehow maneuver in a way where they add that card to their hand and they switch it out with another card that was in their hand, it's hard to tell sometimes. So it's really important to make sure to ask your opponent to keep their hands or hand above the table at all times. That's why it's also important where if I'm drinking water and stuff like that, if I want to relax and have my hands off the table and just chill, that's why I always put my Pokemon hand on the table with the die on top to represent how many cards are in my hand. This is a cheat that a very famous Lugia player once did that ended up getting him banned for, I believe, 6 months. Very famous Lugia player, I might add. The story goes is they opened up with their 7-card hand and they saw the one little Cincino illustration rare, I believe, or Mincino, whatever the smaller rat was. He didn't like his hand and proceeded to mulligan his hand into his deck before his opponent got to get a real good look at the mulligan. And his opponent did notice that there was a basic Pokemon in there. Then it became a he said, she said sort of conundrum. And luckily this Lugia player ended up getting a temporary ban. But yeah, just something like that. Getting an opening start mulligan hand that you know is no good. And trying to pull it off at a regional tournament is crazy, crazy work. So when your opponent is doing the mulligan, take your time. Make sure you see every single card in there, because there's one, you're gonna get to see the leaks, the sauce, what cards are in their deck, and two, you want to really verify that there's no basics in there. Kind of just like playing too fast, right? They're trying to get the benefit of the doubt by doing the mulligan so fast that you can't even catch that they were cheating to begin with. If you made it to this point of the video, shout out to you. I would love if you hit that like button down below, and I hope you've learned something in this video, or at least found it a little bit entertaining hearing some of the stuff I was yapping about. Feel free to hit that like button down below and shop with my sponsors Endgame or Comfy Hobbies with code SneakerTalk to save some money off your sleeves and Pokemon cards.